Debate, and from all of us to all of you, a very happy new year. If you think back to 12 months ago when leaders were caught wrong-footed on both sides of the Mediterranean, there was the Arab uprising. Now, twice since, the Arab League has come to the fore in a big way. First, in the spring, by condemning Muammar Gaddafi, paving the way for intervention in Libya. And in the closing days of 2011, by sending observers to Syria. Now, as the argument rages over whether their presence ultimately helps stop the bloodshed or buy time for the regime, we're going to be looking at what an observer mission like this one entails, and also the conclusions that the Arab League might draw from its findings. In a region where we're going to be having a look in at who is really setting the agenda on Syria. Today in the France 24 debate, is it mission impossible for the Arab League? And with us to talk about it, Syrian activist Majed Aid. Thank you for being with us. Columnist Fouad Al-Obaid of the Kuwait Times. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
From Beirut, he's the former military governor for the Lebanese capital. General Hisham Jaber now heads the Middle East Center for Studies and Public Affairs. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Also with us, Anna Nestad of Human Rights Watch, and Laurie Dunton of the Partnership for a Secure America, which is, it's not a what is it, a bipartisan think tank?
Bipartisan think tank in Washington, D.C.
In Washington, D.C., okay. The France 24 debate, which you can, by the way, follow on Facebook and on Twitter, our handle here, at FrancoisF24. And hey, by the way, we're not the only ones who have been wishing viewers a happy new year. Take a look.
Good afternoon. Welcome to a news bulletin on this first day of 2012. Happy New Year to you all. The mission of the Arab League observers continued its tour in various Syrian cities and areas. Teams of these observers visited the National Hospital in Homs, as another team visited Bab Drib. In Idlib, a team from the Commission visited the city and its National Hospital and visited Daraa Sports City and the Palace of Justice yesterday.
All right, so there we see it, a tour that was headlined at the top of the news bulletin. Majed Aid, is that damning with faint praise, I suppose, or damning with praise in this instance, the fact that getting the endorsement of being top of the bulletin on the Syrian news there?
Well, praised, I don't know if it's praised really, but it reflects how dangerous the situation is in Syria now, how brutal it is now. All the killing, everything is happening, even with the existence of the observers now in Syria. The observers now are there. The killing are continuing, the killing of people, of children, the snipers on the roofs. Even the observers, they said we could see the snipers on the roofs. So yeah, it's normal to be the first headline, and maybe it's a good sign for the Syrian people that the world is taking some care of their issue, because all we can see till now is the silence of the world. We can't see really effective steps towards stopping the killing in Syria. We can see now only the Arab League trying to show that they care, but we don't think that they really care. What we can see now, we can see covering for the crimes of Bashar al-Assad, especially after the statement of the president of the Arab League today.
All right, the president of the Arab League, who, by the way, admitted that the killing, he said that the killing was continuing. He denounced it. The Secretary General of the Arab League, who's been answering critics this Monday, Nabil El Arabi, reminding a press conference that a lot more observers are on the way, and he hints at an Arab League foreign ministers meeting next week, by which time that observer mission will have forwarded initial findings.
There's no sign of army forces in the cities. The tanks and cannons have been removed from the cities. Observers were able to provide food supplies to some cities, especially Homs. They were also successful in pulling out dead bodies. The rumors about some recent shootings are true. The rumors about snipers that are still operating in some cities are also true. I spoke to the head of the observers delegation, and we want all kinds of violence to end.
Now, those tanks may have withdrawn from city centers, but they're not far, according to one of our France 24 observers, who we spoke to a short while ago in the Bab Amr neighborhood of the city of Homs, where a lot of the fighting has been taking place, a lot of the crackdown has been taking place the last couple of weeks.
I can see the Arab League monitors are making efforts, but we're worried about the final result of their mission. I don't want to doubt the quality of their work, but what I see here is that the killing's continuing, so we're waiting to see their report. What I can tell you is that today, on January the 2nd, 2012, is that there are still tanks here in Homs. I saw one today with my own eyes in the neighborhood of Bab Amr.
So Anna Nistad, one of our France 24 observers there, saying he's still seeing tanks in the city center of Homs. What's the situation as appraised by Human Rights Watch?
Well, I think it's not surprising. Basically, generally speaking, we're seeing that the Syrian regime is not keeping its promises given to the Arab League. What we heard from our contacts on the ground just recently is that the Syrian authorities are trying to hide the detainees from the Syrian observers. They moved them from detention facilities that the observers were allowed to visit. We also heard, speaking of the tanks, that some of the military were issued police badges to pretend that they're police and not military, and thus to pretend that the Syrian regime is complying with the agreement it made with the Arab League. So it's looking more and more like the Syrians are trying to buy the time rather than actually observe the agreement that they reached.
Is it better that they went or better that they not have gone?
It's a very good question. I think on one hand, it was fair to give the Syrians the last chance to show that they're sincere. It might have served as a deterrent to a certain extent. It's hard to tell. The killings are still continuing. And I think it was very important for the Arab League to see with its own eyes and to hear from their own observers, not from Human Rights Watch, not from the journalists, but from their own observers, what is going on. Because now there is very little they can say in response to the overall international criticism. It would be very hard for them to continue defending the Syrian regime.
Hisham Jaber, do you agree?
No, let me be objective. First of all, we have to say that what is to define the mission of the Arab League observers. They came for four missions. Only 4 missions is to withdraw the army from the streets and release the arrested people, then allowed the Syrian people to make a peaceful demonstration, then to allow the mass media to go there. They are not to go to Syria and to show the reality. They are not there for other missions. They are not there to listen to political theory. They are not there to see if the regime in Syria is doing reforms or not. It's something out of their missions. Of course, after the arrival of the Arab League observers, they became a matter of controversy. On one hand, they have been sent by the Arab League, and on the other hand, we see the head of the Arab Parliament, for example, yesterday, he said they are biased, they are doing nothing, they are not doing their mission. The problem is very complicated, in my opinion. The question is the Syrian regime killing the demonstrators, yes or no? Or using force, or withdraw the tanks from the cities? All those questions. You asked me, an ex-general in the Lebanese army. Let me tell you something. Why the tanks are in Hamas? Why they are shooting some populated area? Because there are insurgents there. Nobody can deny the presence of the insurgents. Nobody can deny the presence of deserters from the army who are using weapons. On the other hand, the Syrian army, must use tanks and maybe a lot of forces.
Hang on. Are you saying Hisham Jaber that there are insurgents in all of the major cities where there have been uprisings?
Let me tell you something. Mrs. Hillary Clinton did not deny this, did recognize this, and she said, Mrs. Hillary Clinton, with all my respect, she said the opposition in Syria, they are well trained and well equipped. That's what she said. That means nobody deny the presence of the insurgent. Nobody can deny the presence of the deserters from the army, which the opposition now count them, and they said they are about 10,000.
All right, let me bring in Anna Nested on this. What has Human Rights Watch found?
Well, insurgents is a very tricky word, right? If you listen to the Syrian government, there are insurgents, rebels, sponsored from abroad, and abroad ranges from Mossad to Saudi Arabia, you name it. What we documented were certain incidents of violence by the protesters, not in the beginning, but let's say starting from August, September. There were clearly incidents of violence. There was some use of force, and now we're seeing more and more deserters taking the side of the protesters. To call them insurgents and to say that they're well equipped and well trained and prepared and sponsored and all of that, I think is a serious exaggeration. Plus, the question is whether in any case that justifies the enormous crackdown, hundreds and hundreds of tanks that were sent to suppress this protest. Our research showed that the majority of the protests were peaceful. And the incidents of violence definitely should be investigated and the perpetrators brought to account, but by no means they justify what the Syrian government has done.
Hisham Jaber, let me just pick up on that second point there and just ask you the question. Do you think that it's better that the Arab League observers have, that the fact that they came, or should they have stayed home in the first place?
No, first of all, I have to tell you that I agree with your guess. Even I don't see the TV now. And second, to answer your question, I think it's better to come and to see. And the Syrians, are they cooperating or not? This is the report. This is the answer is Arab League. And so far, they didn't say that the government in Syria is not cooperating with them. And then when the Arab League, the whole Arab League and the international society asked to stop violence in Syria, of course, the regime must reply first and be positive. And on the other hand, also the insurgent and the others, the opposition who has weapons, must stop also violence. Because if the regime withdraw the army from the streets and the opposition will continue military operation inside the populating area, it will be catastrophe. And let me, I'm not defending at all what the Syrians are doing. The Syrians had the opportunity to solve the problem 6 months ago, but they didn't, and stayed on going on 4 axes. For example, they are going for 8 months or 10 months so far, using only military acts and security acts. And this act also needs to be rectified and to separate between, to distinguish between a peaceful demonstrator and insurgent.
Okay.
The second act, which was zero, is the mass media. The third act, which is reform, is very, very slow. And the fourth act, which is diplomacy, they failed under diplomacy.
All right,
now we are facing a problem.
Let's bring it back, Hisham Jaber. Let's bring it back to the issue of what the Arab League Observer is actually doing there. You mentioned, and so did you, Majed, the fact that we've seen open sort of dissension within that observer mission in the short while that they've been there. On YouTube, one observer appears to confirm seeing sniper fire. His remarks then played down by his boss. Take a listen.
They're Amelia. Snipers. We saw them with our own eyes. We're going to call on the authorities to remove them immediately, and we will contact the Arab League immediately if they do not comply within 24 hours. But please allow me to say this. We've come here and have not received anything in return. You didn't tell us what your grievances were, and we haven't benefited from coming here. You're telling me that there are snipers, and I'm telling you that I have seen the snipers with my own eyes,
This man, he said that if he see by his eyes those snipers, he will report immediately and he will tell the government, the Syrian government, so as. But he didn't see.
All right, that was General Mustafa al-Dabi, the Sudanese head of the mission. Let me ask you this question, Laurie Dundon. In that interview with the BBC, General al-Dabi, is he right to say that his observer on the ground was misquoted?
This is going to be a fast-moving mission in the middle of a fast-moving, violent situation on the ground.
there's going to be quotes coming left and right, directly out through YouTube and the other channel and other media channels. The mission right now is most successful if they can report everything. The more they can report, the better chance you have of getting past the manipulation. The manipulation of one supervisor saying his comments weren't valid, of politicians at the political level trying to edit and shape the scope of the report that's going to come out in January, and for governments to be able to say, this is just echoing the Syrian government's approach.
So give us an idea of how disparate this observer mission is.
You've got, right now on the ground, I think about 60 some observers covering a huge amount of territory. By the time you pair people up to go out into the field in teams of 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, you're getting very little coverage and a very programmed, predictable schedule. That mission is going to basically be a series of incidents. And if you happen to be at an occurrence of violence at the onset, when both sides are now arguing over who shot first, who's the cause, who's the insurgent, it's going to be even more important in these strained circumstances, to report everything, get as much word out. And as you had mentioned, so it's not just individual NGOs reporting and all those brave individuals who have been reporting on their cell phones, but you also have official representatives passing along what they're seeing. That's, I think, the best chance we've got.
Anna Nista, if you were going into this mission, what would you say? How do you go about observing Syria right now?
Well, I did go, so I know how difficult it is to work in Syria, and definitely the key is that the government is doing everything possible to hide the truth from the mission, and it's not surprising. The more abusive the government is, the more it would try to hide. So they have to be clever. On one hand, it is being in the right time at the right place and just seeing things that the government just can't hide.
Did you have to surprise them and show up at places you weren't supposed to be? How did you go about it?
Yeah, it's extremely difficult. You have to work essentially undercover. You have to meet with people. You have to be also to navigate, both sides, because you also cannot trust any opposition leader who wants to give you information. You have to interview hundreds and hundreds of people, many of them in secret, and to make sure that they're safe. That's another issue. They can go and talk to people, but what's going to happen to these people afterwards? That's another tricky scenario. You have to go to places that the government is not showing you, such as, for example, secret hospitals that people set up in their homes after people were arrested from the government-run hospitals or the hospitals that the government took over. So they have to go there. They have to speak to people who were wounded and interview them in great detail. We did hours and hours and hours of interviews to come up with a 60-page report. So, but another thing is, for example, detention facilities. They were told that they're given access to detention facilities. The question is, which detention facilities? There are now tens of thousands of people who have been detained since the beginning of the protests. And, I'm pretty...
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. And I'm giving you a very conservative estimate. Many of them have been released, but, they are arresting hundreds of people during every raid. They're not held in official detention places. To see them, to find them, you have to look.
All right, with those obstacles, we're going to take a look when we come back at how you piece together this report, and then what's the Arab League going to do with it? Stay with us.